Rain hammered the metal roof like bullets. Danny wiped grease from his hands and listened to the storm tear through the salvage yard. Thunder shook the walls of his small workshop. He'd been replacing power cells in an old mining drone when the noise started outside. Not thunder. Something else. The crash came from behind the stack of broken ship parts. Danny grabbed his plasma torch and moved toward the sound. His boots splashed through puddles forming on the concrete floor. Another crash. Then silence. He found her bleeding behind a pile of scrap metal. The child couldn't have been more than 8 years old. Her skin was pale blue, almost silver in the dim light. 3 arrows stuck out of her small back. Purple blood pooled beneath her. She wore clothes that might have been expensive once, now torn and muddy. Her violet eyes stared at him with pure terror. Danny dropped the torch and knelt beside her. His hands moved on instinct, the same movements he'd learned in the military years ago. Check the wounds. Stop the bleeding. Keep them alive. The arrows had black tips. Poison. He could see it spreading through her veins like dark ink beneath her skin. Easy, kid, Danny whispered. He didn't know if she understood English. I've got you. She whimpered when he touched the first arrow. Smart girl. Those barbs would tear her apart if he just pulled them out. He needed tools. Medicine. Tommy didn't have. Danny scooped her up as gently as he could. She weighed almost nothing. He carried her into his workshop and laid her on his workbench, pushing aside tools and parts. Her blood stained the metal surface that he was reaching for his medical kit when the door exploded inward. 3 figures in black masks rushed inside. They moved like professionals, weapons drawn, silent except for their footsteps. The first one raised a crossbow loaded with the same poisoned arrows. Danny didn't think. He threw himself over the child's body. The arrow punched through his shoulder. Fire spread from the wound. The poison burned like acid in his veins. Danny screamed, but didn't move. Another arrow hit his side. He felt it scrape against his ribs. The assassins moved closer. Danny's vision blurred. His right arm wouldn't work anymore. He grabbed the plasma torch with his left hand and triggered it. The blue flame roared to life. The lead assassin dodged backward. Danny swung the torch and a wide arc fire filled his workshop. The heat drove them back. He used the moment to kick his workbench. It crashed into the nearest attacker. The masked figure fell hard. Danny's legs gave out. He collapsed against the bench, still covering the child with his body. Blood ran down his arm. The poison made everything fuzzy at the edges. The second assassin came at him. Danny threw the torch. It missed, but the fuel tank ruptured. Flames spread across the floor. The workshop filled with smoke and heat. The assassins retreated toward the door, but the third one raised a pistol. Danny watched the barrel aim at the child's head. His body wouldn't move fast enough. The poison had spread too far. The siren wailed outside. Red and blue lights flashed through the smoke. The assassin hesitated. Then all 3 figures ran into the storm. Gone as fast as they'd appeared, Danny's head hit the floor. Couldn't feel his legs anymore. Couldn't feel much of anything. The child was crying. He could hear her through the ringing in his ears. His medical kit sat 5 feet away. Might as well have been 5 miles. Danny crawled toward it. Each movement sent fresh pain through his body. The poison was shutting him down piece by piece. He reached the kit and dragged it back to the child. His hand shook so badly he could barely open it. Anti-venom. 3 doses left. Enough for 1 person. Maybe. Danny looked at the child. She stared back at him with those huge violet eyes. Tears ran down her blue cheeks. She was so small, so scared. He jammed all 3 doses into her arm. The child gasped. The black veins in her skin began to fade. Not fast, but enough. Enough to maybe keep her alive until real help arrived. Danny fell backward. The ceiling spun above him. He could hear boots running into the workshop. Voices shouting. Hands grabbed him, but he couldn't tell whose. Everything was getting dark. Someone pulled the child away from him. She screamed, tried to reach for him. Danny wanted to tell her it was okay, that she was safe now. But his voice wouldn't work. The last thing he saw was her small hand reaching through the crowd of people. She was holding something, a crystal pendant on a silver chain. It glowed with soft light. Then darkness took him. Danny woke 3 days later in a colonial hospital. White walls, Machines beeping, tubes in his arms. His whole body ached like he'd been run over by a cargo hauler that a nurse told him he'd almost died. The poison should have killed him. They didn't understand how he survived. Danny didn't tell them he'd given the anti-venom to the child instead. The nurse mentioned the alien girl. She'd been taken by her own people. Royal family from some empire called the Ascari. Important people. They wanted to thank Danny, but colonial security kept them away. Protocol. Regulations. The usual garbage. Danny found the crystal pendant on his bedside table. The only thing left behind. It was small, no bigger than his thumb, carved with symbols he couldn't read. The chain was real silver. Expensive. He held it up to the light. The crystal glowed softly, the same way it had that night. Danny didn't know what it meant. Probably just a thank you gift. He tucked it into his pocket. When he was released from the hospital, Danny went back to his workshop. The fire damage wasn't too bad. He could rebuild. He always did. But sometimes late at night, he'd take out the crystal and wonder about the child. Wonder if she was okay. If the poison had any lasting effects. If she even remembered him. He'd never know. That was fine. She was alive. That was enough. Danny went back to fixing broken machines and trying to forget. The crystal stayed in his pocket. A reminder that sometimes doing the right thing was simple. You just had to be willing to bleed for it. 15 years changed everything. Danny's workshop had grown. 3 buildings now instead of 1. He employed 12 people, most of them kids he'd found on the streets with nowhere else to go. He taught them to fix engines and weld hulls and survive in a universe that didn't care about them. Today, he was showing a girl named Beth how to calibrate a navigation computer. She was 16, quick with her hands, quicker with her mind. She'd probably run her own shop someday. The television in the corner blared news. Danny usually ignored it. Political nonsense. Trade disputes. Nothing that mattered to people trying to make an honest living. But Beth stopped working and pointed at the screen. "Hey, boss, look at her." Danny glanced up. The news showed a tall woman in elaborate armor standing before thousands of aliens. The caption read, "Ascari Empire declares war on human colonies." The woman had pale blue skin. Violet eyes. Danny's chest tightened. "She looks familiar," Beth said. "Like I've seen her before." Danny touched the crystal in his pocket. He'd carried it every day for 15 years. Yeah, maybe. The news got worse. The Ascari had superior weapons, better ships, more soldiers. The human colonies didn't stand a chance. Analysts predicted total defeat within 6 months. 3 weeks later, Danny received his draft notice that he stood in the recruitment center holding the paper like it might bite him. Return to military service. Report for medical duty. Non negociable. "I'm 49 years old," Danny told the recruitment officer. "You're qualified. You're needed. You're going." The officer stamped his file. "Transport leaves in 2 days." Danny went home and looked at his workshop, at the kids he'd trained. Beth promised to keep everything running. He didn't believe her, but appreciated the lie. The crystal pendant went into his pocket. Same place it always rode. The war was worse than the news reported. Danny's medical unit was assigned to Greywater, a muddy planet on the border between human and Ascari territory. The fighting happened in trenches and bombed-out cities. Soldiers came to him missing limbs, bleeding from wounds that wouldn't close, screaming from pain that wouldn't stop. He saved the ones he could. Watched the others die. Started losing count after the first month. The Ascari weren't monsters. That was the strange part. When they captured human positions, they took prisoners instead of executing them. They followed rules of war that most human pirates ignored. Their soldiers fought with honor, made it harder to hate them, made the whole thing feel even more pointless. Danny worked alongside a young medic named Mara, 23 years old, bright red hair, steady hands even when artillery shook the ground. She reminded him of Beth. "Why'd they draft you?" Mara asked one night between wounded soldiers. "I used to be good at this," Danny said, tying off a bleeding artery. "Long time ago. You're still good at it. Doesn't make it easier." The Ascari offensive came at dawn. Their ships appeared in the sky like dark birds. Dropships landed around the medical camp. Soldiers poured out in organized waves. Danny grabbed a rifle. The other medics did the same. 23 people against 200 Ascari soldiers. The math didn't work, but they'd fight anyway. The Ascari commander walked through the front entrance. Tall, armored, carrying a plasma rifle. His men spread out behind him, weapons ready. Danny raised his rifle. His hands didn't shake. After everything he'd seen, death didn't scare him anymore. The commander stopped, stared at Danny, specifically at Danny's chest. The crystal pendant hung outside Danny's shirt. He'd forgotten to tuck it back in. The commander lowered his weapon. He spoke in harsh, clipped words to his soldiers. They lowered their weapons too. "You will come with us," the commander said in accented English. "No harm. You are protected." "Protected by what?" Danny asked. The commander pointed at the crystal. "By her law." They took Danny to their flagship, a massive ship that made human carriers look like toys. He was given a private room. Guards outside, but they didn't threaten him. Didn't even take his crystal. Mara and the other medics weren't harmed. The Ascari actually left them medical supplies before pulling out. Danny heard about it later and couldn't make sense of it. The other human prisoners thought Danny was a spy, a collaborator. They whispered when he walked past. Some spat at his feet. Danny sat in his cell and held the crystal up to the light. It glowed the same way it had 15 years ago. He thought it was just a pretty rock, a memento. Apparently, it was more than that. A guard came for him after 3 days. Danny was escorted through corridors filled with Ascari soldiers. They all stopped and stared at him, not with anger, with something else. Curiosity, maybe, or recognition. They brought him to a massive door, 2 stories tall, carved with symbols and images of battles. The guard pressed his hand to a panel, and the door opened. The throne room stretched out before him. Pillars rose to a ceiling Danny couldn't see. Hundreds of Ascari stood along the walls. Nobles, maybe. Officers. People who mattered. They could see the far end. A woman sat on a throne made of black stone. She wore armor chased with silver. A crown rested on her head. But Danny recognized her eyes. She stood and walked down the steps. Her people bowed as she passed. She stopped 3 feet from Danny, close enough to touch. Her hands trembled. "Do you remember the rain?" she asked in perfect English that Danny's mouth went dry. The child he'd saved. The little girl bleeding on his workbench. Now she was this. "Lyra," he whispered. She smiled. Tears ran down her blue cheeks. "You remember my name. After all this time, you were just a kid. You saved my life. You gave me a medicine. Took arrows meant for me." She reached out and touched the crystal. "I have searched for you for 15 years. This beacon only activated when I took the throne. When I finally had the power to bring you home. This isn't my home. No, but you are under my protection now." She looked at the nobles watching them. "I owe you everything." Danny looked at her. Really looked. She'd grown into a queen. Strong. Confident. Nothing like the terrified child in the storm. "Then end this war," Danny said. Silence filled the throne room. Lyra's smile faded. She glanced at the nobles lining the walls. They stared at Danny with expressions ranging from shock to anger. One of them, an older male with scars across his face, stepped forward. "You dare make demands of our queen?" His voice echoed off the stone walls. "I'm not demanding. I am asking." Danny met the noble's eyes. "How many people have died in this war? Thousands? Tens of thousands. Human aggression started this conflict," another noble said. A female with silver hair. "Your people killed innocent Ascari workers. Murdered them in cold blood." "What workers? Where?" Lyra raised her hand. The nobles fell silent. "Come with me, Danny Cross. We will speak in private." She led him through a side door into a smaller chamber. Windows looked out over stars. A table held maps and reports. Lyra dismissed her guards with a gesture. They left reluctantly. When they were alone, she slumped into a chair. The queenly posture vanished. She looked tired, young. "I wanted to prevent this war," she said quietly. "I argued against it for months. My council outvoted me. Even a queen must answer to her people's anger." "Tell me what happened." Lyra pulled up a holographic display. It showed a mining station orbiting a distant planet. 3 months ago, this human facility experienced an equipment failure. En explosion. 27 Ascari workers were killed, all of them civilians. Families. Danny studied the images. Bodies floating in space. Debris scattered across kilometers. Equipment failures happen. It's terrible, but it's not murder. The human company refused to cooperate with our investigation. They claimed it was an accident and closed the matter. My people demanded justice. When your colonies refused to provide it, my council voted for military action. She looked at him. I cannot stop them. You're the queen. I am one voice among many. If I had opposed them too strongly, they would have removed me from power. Then someone far worse would sit on this throne. Someone who would turn this war into genocide. Danny walked to the window. Human ships burned in the distance. Small lights winking out one by one. What do you want from me? I want you to investigate the mining station. Find the truth. If it was an accident, I will accept that and work to end this war. But if it was murder, if humans truly killed my people deliberately, then justice must be served. And if I find evidence against humans, you'll use it to justify more war. No. Lyra stood and joined him at the window. I will use it to satisfy my council's need for justice. Trials. Punishment for the guilty. Not war against innocence. Danny turned to face her. Why me? You have investigators. Experts. Because you're the only human I trust completely. And because you were the pendant of death. While you carry it, no Ascari can harm you. It is our highest law. Life debt must be honored. I didn't save you for a reward. I know. That is why I trust you. Danny touched the crystal at his chest. If I do this, I work alone. No handlers. No watchers. You may have one escort. For your protection and to verify your findings. She pressed a button on the wall. A door opened and a large Ascari warrior entered. He wore simple armor marked with scars from countless battles. This is Torin. He was my personal guard when I was a child. He witnessed your sacrifice. He will accompany you. Torin bowed slightly to Danny. It is an honor to serve the life giver. I'm just a mechanic, Danny said. You are the one who taught our queen that compassion has value. That is no small thing. Lyra provided Danny with a ship and access codes. Torin piloted while Danny studied the reports about the mining station. The more he read, the less sense it made. The explosion happened during a shift change. Maximum casualties. The human company blamed a faulty reactor core. But the Ascari workers weren't anywhere near the reactor when it blew. They arrived at the station 3 days later. It hung in space like a broken toy. Sections vented to vacuum. Hull breached in a dozen places. Danny and Torin suited up and moved through the wreckage. Emergency lights flickered. Their footsteps echoed in empty corridors. The bodies were still there, frozen in the cold vacuum. Danny found them in what looked like a storage bay. 27 Ascari workers, men and women, young and old that he examined the nearest body. Female, maybe 30 years old. Her suit was intact. No signs of explosion damage, but there were 3 small holes in her chest. Torin, look at this. The warrior moved closer. His face went hard behind his helmet visor. Bullet wounds. Danny checked another body. Same thing. And another. All of them shot before the explosion. This wasn't an accident, Danny said. This was murder. They searched the rest of the station. Found more evidence. Bullet casings. Scorch marks from weapons fire. Signs of fight. The Ascari workers had tried to defend themselves in the control room. Danny accessed what was left of the security system. Most of the data was corrupted, but he found fragments of video files. Enough to see masked figures moving through corridors. Enough to see them shooting unarmed workers. The attackers weren't wearing human uniforms. Weren't wearing anything identifiable. Professional mercenaries. Danny pulled every file he could salvage. Stored them on a portable drive. This was bigger than a mining accident. This was a setup. They were about to leave when something exploded behind them. The corridor filled with fire. Danny and Torin were thrown against the wall. More explosions. Someone was trying to destroy the evidence. And them with it. Move! Torin grabbed Danny and hauled him toward their ship. Sections of the station broke apart around them. Hull plating peeled away. Atmosphere vented in white clouds. They made it to the ship with seconds to spare. Torin fired the engines, and they blasted away from the station. Behind them, The entire structure collapsed in on itself. A final explosion turned it into debris. Danny watched it disappear. Someone didn't want the truth to come out. Someone with enough resources to sabotage a space station and cover their tracks. "We need to get this evidence to Lyra," he said. "Agreed. But we should assume whoever did this will try to stop us." Danny checked the data drive. It was intact. Barely. Let them try. The flight back took 2 days. They jumped between systems, taking random routes to avoid tracking. Danny barely slept. He kept seeing those bullet wounds, those frozen faces. When they reached the Ascari flagship, Lyra met them personally. Danny handed her the data drive. "It wasn't an accident," he said. "Your people were executed, but I don't think humans ordered it." Lyra's face went pale as she reviewed the evidence. Who then? Someone who wanted this war to happen. Someone who profits from it. Lyra called an emergency council session. Every noble in the Empire attended. They gathered in the Great Hall while Danny stood before them holding the evidence. Torin stood beside him, hand on his weapon. The scarred noble from before, Lord Kren, spoke first. "You bring us the word of a human? After they slaughtered our people, I bring you proof," Danny said. He activated the holographic display. Video footage played above their heads. Masked figures shooting unarmed workers. Bodies falling. Blood on the walls. The nobles watched in silence. Some looked angry. Others looked sick. "These could be human soldiers," another noble said, wearing masks to hide their identity. Danny froze the image on one of the attackers. "Look at the weapons. Those aren't human military issue. They're Kren Consortium. See the serial numbers on the rifle stock." Murmurs spread through the council. The Kren were weapons dealers, arms merchants who sold to anyone with money. They had no loyalty to any species. "The Kren profit from war," Torin said. "The longer we fight humans, the more weapons both sides purchase." This massacre was designed to start a conflict. Lord Kren stepped forward. His face was hard. "Or this is an elaborate human deception. Manufactured evidence to absolve their guilt." "Then explain the bullet wounds," Danny said. "Your people weren't killed by an explosion. They were executed, shot in the back while trying to run. The explosion was just cover. Convenient that the station was destroyed before we could retrieve the bodies. That wasn't us. Someone blew it up while we were still inside. Someone who didn't want this evidence found." The council erupted into arguments. Some believed Danny. Others refused to consider his findings. Lyra watched it all with growing frustration. Finally, she stood. "Enough. We will investigate the Kren connection. Until we have more information, I am ordering a ceasefire." "You cannot," Lord Kren said. "The people demand justice. The people demand the truth. I will give it to them." But the council voted against her. 17-3. The war would continue. Danny left the hall feeling hollow. Torin walked beside him, equally silent. "Your queen tried," Danny said. "She is young. The council remembers when they held more power. They resist her at every turn." They reached Danny's quarters. A message was waiting for him. Text only, no signature. It read, "The evidence you found is incomplete. The Kren have a base on Talus Station. More proof is there. Come alone." "It's a trap," Torin said immediately. "Probably. But what if it's not? Then I'm coming with you." They took a small ship and jumped to Talus Station. It was a neutral port in unclaimed space. Ships from a dozen species docked there. Pirates, traders, people who didn't ask questions. Danny and Torin moved through crowded markets. Aliens of every type haggled over goods both legal and otherwise. The air smelled like fuel and spices and things Danny couldn't identify. A figure in a hooded cloak bumped into Danny, pressed something into his hand. A data chip, then disappeared into the crowd before Danny could react. They found a quiet corner and examined the chip. It contained financial records, money transfers, payments from the Kren to shell companies on both human and Ascari worlds. "They're paying agitators on both sides," Torin said, scanning the data. "Funding protests, bribing officials, keeping the war going." Danny found another file. Names and faces. Human and Ascari working for the Kren, including some people in Lyra's own council. "Lord Kren," Danny breathed. He's been taking Kren money for 2 years. Before Torin could respond, gunfire erupted around them. The market exploded into chaos. People screamed and ran. Aliens dove for cover. Kren mercenaries advanced through the crowd. Dozens of them. They weren't trying to hide anymore. Torin grabbed Danny and hauled him behind a vendor stall. Bullets tore through the metal. We need to move. Now. They ran through the station with mercenaries close behind. Torin fired back with his pistol, dropped 3 attackers. But more kept coming. Danny's lungs burned. His legs felt like lead. He wasn't young anymore. Couldn't run like this. But he forced himself to keep moving. They reached their ship and sealed the hatch. Bullets pinged off the hull. Torin fired the engines while Danny collapsed into a seat. The ship launched just as an explosion tore through the docking bay. Someone had planted charges, trying to destroy them and the evidence, but they made it clear. Barely. Danny held the data chip like it was made of gold. This was everything they needed. Proof of the conspiracy. Names and dates and money trails. They transmitted the evidence to Lyra using encrypted channels, then broadcast it to every news network in human and Ascari space. The response was immediate. Riots broke out on both sides. People demanding answers, demanding justice, not against each other, against the Kren. But the Kren weren't finished. Danny was reviewing more of the data when Torin's communicator chimed. A priority message from the Ascari homeworld. That Torin's face went white as he listened. No, it cannot be. What happened? Bombings. Simultaneous attacks on 3 civilian centers. Human and Ascari targets. Thousands dead. Torin looked at Danny with horror. The Kren are accelerating their plan. They know he exposed them. They're trying to make the war unstoppable. Danny felt sick. How many died? Early reports say over 5,000, including the human medical unit on Greywater. The world stopped. Danny couldn't breathe. What unit? The field hospital where you served. It was completely destroyed. Mara. Beth had joined the service 2 months ago and been assigned there. All the medics he'd worked with. Gone. Danny stood slowly. His hands shook with rage. Where is the Kren leadership? Where do they operate from? Danny, we cannot just attack them. They are protected by neutrality laws. I don't care about laws anymore. They killed my people. Where are they? Torin hesitated, then pulled up a star map. Their main headquarters is on Refuge Prime, a heavily defended installation in neutral space. No government has jurisdiction. Then no government needs to know we're going. That is suicide. Even with an army, we could not breach their defenses. Danny looked at Torin. I'm not asking for an army. I'm asking if you'll help me to make them pay. Torin was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. You saved my queen. You gave her a future. I will help you avenge your fallen. We'll need a team. Small. Fussed. People with nothing left to lose. I know such people. Over the next week, they assembled a crew. 3 Ascari warriors who'd lost family to Kren weapons. For human soldiers who'd survived the hospital bombing. A pilot named Sarah who'd lost her entire squadron. 8 people total. Against the most dangerous arms dealers in the galaxy. Danny briefed them on the plan. It was insane. Probably impossible. Most of them wouldn't survive, and O1 backed out. They loaded their ship with weapons and armor, made their peace with death, and set course for Refuge Prime. Refuge Prime looked peaceful from orbit. A massive space station with gardens visible through transparent domes. Ships came and went freely. No one questioned visitors. That was the point of neutral territory. Danny watched it grow larger on the view screen. Somewhere inside that station, the Kren leaders were planning their next massacre. Counting their profits from a war. Not for much longer. Sarah piloted them to a public docking bay. They registered as traders, paid the docking fees, walked into the station like they belonged there. The Kren headquarters occupied the entire upper section. Security was heavy, but not military grade. They relied on their neutral status for protection. No one was stupid enough to attack them here. Danny's team split into 3 groups. Torin led one, Sarah another. Danny took the third. They had 2 hours to get into position before the security systems rotated shifts. Danny moved through crowded corridors with 2 human soldiers. They wore civilian clothes and carried nothing visible. Their weapons were hidden in false-bottom cargo containers being delivered to a warehouse near the Kren sector. Everything depended on timing that Danny's communicator buzzed once. Torrens' team was in position. Twice. Sarah's team ready. Danny triggered the detonator. The explosion wasn't large, just enough to crack a water main and trigger evacuation alarms in the lower sectors. Chaos erupted as station security rushed to contain the flooding. Danny's team moved fast, retrieved their weapons from the warehouse, breached the service entrance to the Kren sector while guards were distracted. They met resistance immediately. Kren security wasn't station security. These were trained killers. Bullets filled the corridor. Danny dropped behind a support beam. Return fire. One guard down. Two. His soldiers advanced with precision. But Danny's body wasn't young anymore. His movements were slower. His aim less steady. He'd been a medic, not a fighter. The years showed in every motion that a Kren guard appeared from a side passage. Raised a rifle at Danny's head. Danny's weapon was empty. No time to reload. That Torrens' blade took the guard's head off. The warrior appeared like a ghost. Stay close to me, life giver. Your death would dishonor us all. They fought through 3 more checkpoints. Danny's team took casualties. One soldier shot in the leg. Another hit in the shoulder. But they kept moving. Sarah's team breached from the east. Her explosives took out a generator. Lights flickered. Emergency systems activated. Danny's lungs burned. His legs felt like rubber. But he pushed forward. Mara's face appeared in his mind. Beth smiled. All the people who died because the Kren wanted profit, they reached the central command level. The Kren leadership was barricaded inside. Heavy doors, armed guards, automated defenses. Danny pulled out the charges he'd prepared. Military-grade explosives. Enough to blow through reinforced steel. Everyone back, he ordered. The explosion shook the entire sector. The doors blew inward. Smoke filled the air. Danny charged through with Torren beside him. The command center looked like a luxury office. Expensive furniture. Art on the walls. Aliens in fine suits staring in shock. One of them, a tall alien with gray skin and too many arms, reached for a weapon on his desk. Torren's blade pinned his hand to the wood. You killed thousands of people, Danny said. His voice was cold. Steady. Started a war for money. We provided a service, the alien hissed. Both sides wanted weapons. We merely supplied demand. You created the demand. Murdered innocent workers. Bombed hospitals. Another Kren leader stood. Female. Red scales. You cannot touch us here. This is neutral space. You have no authority. I don't need authority. Danny raised his weapon. Sarah's voice crackled over the communicator. Danny, station security is mobilizing. We have maybe 5 minutes before they lock down the entire sector. The Kren leader smiled. They thought they'd won. Thought Danny would run. Instead, he accessed their computer system. Downloaded everything. Financial records. Client lists. Future operations. Every dirty secret the Kren had been hiding. What are you doing? The gray-skinned alien demanded. Making sure everyone knows what you are. Danny transmitted the data to every major news network in the galaxy. Human. Ascari. Everyone else too. The Kren leaders' faces went pale. Their empire was built on secrets. On staying in the shadows. Danny had just dragged them into the light. Kill them. The female ordered her remaining guards. The guards opened fire. Danny's team returned it. The command center became a war zone. Danny felt something punch into his side. No pain at first, just pressure. He looked down and saw blood spreading across his shirt, poison-tipped blade. A Kren guard had gotten close without him noticing. The guard smiled as Danny fell to his knees. Torren killed the guard with one stroke. Caught Danny before he hit the floor. No, not like this. Danny could feel the poison spreading. Different from the arrows 15 years ago. Faster. More aggressive. His vision blurred at the edges. Get everyone out, he told Torren. His voice sounded far away. I'll set the charges. We do not leave our own behind. I'm not yours. I'm just a mechanic who got lucky once. Danny pushed a detonator into Torren's hand. 5 minutes. Make sure everyone's clear. Sarah's team retreated first. Then Torren's warriors, carrying the wounded. Torin himself refused to leave until Danny physically shoved him toward the exit. "Tell Lyra I'm sorry," Danny said. "Tell her to finish this." Then he was alone with the Kren leaders and enough explosives to vaporize the entire sector. The poison was shutting down his organs one by one. His hands barely worked. His legs wouldn't move at all, but he managed to activate the timer point 3 minutes. The Kren leaders ran for emergency exits. Found them sealed. Danny had locked everything down. They weren't getting out. "You're insane," the gray-skinned one screamed. "This is neutral space. You cannot do this." "Watch me," Danny whispered. His vision went dark. Couldn't feel his body anymore. The poison had won. He thought about his workshop, about the kids he'd trained, about a small alien girl bleeding in the rain that he'd save her once. Maybe this would save everyone else. The explosion lit up space like a second sun. The entire Kren sector of Refuge Prime disintegrated. 20 blocks vaporized instantly. The station's emergency systems contained the damage. Torin's ship barely made it clear. He watched the explosion from a safe distance. Watched Danny's sacrifice destroy the galaxy's most dangerous arms dealers. "May your death honor us all, Life Giver," Torin whispered. Then he set course for the Ascari homeworld. Lyra needed to know what Danny had done. What had cost? They found Danny's body in the wreckage 3 days later. Somehow he'd survived the initial explosion. The blast had thrown him into a maintenance shaft that had sealed automatically. He'd drifted in vacuum, barely alive, poison eating through his system that a rescue team found him by accident while searching for survivors. His heart had stopped twice. His organs were failing. The medics said he should have been dead hours ago, but humans from Earth were stubborn. Their bodies refused to quit even when they should. They brought him to Lyra's personal medical facility. The best doctors in the Ascari Empire worked around the clock. They cleared the poison, repaired the damage, kept his heart beating through sheer determination and technology. But Danny didn't wake up. Lyra sat beside his bed every day. She held his hand and talked to him even though he couldn't hear. Told him about the peace negotiations, about how the evidence he'd gathered had changed everything. The Kren data dump had exposed corruption on both sides. Human officials working for arms dealers. Ascari nobles taking bribes. Lord Chiron had been arrested. Dozens of others with him. Public opinion shifted overnight. People stopped blaming each other. Started blaming the ones who'd manipulated them into war. Peace talks began within a week. Both sides wanted it now. Needed it. But none of that mattered if Danny died on the 4th day. Lyra's doctors gave her the news. The poison had done too much damage. Human medicine couldn't save him. Even Ascari technology had limits. "How long?" Lyra asked. "Hours. Maybe a day if we keep him on life support." Lyra dismissed them all, locked the door, sat beside Danny's bed, and finally let herself cry. She'd spent 15 years trying to be worthy of his sacrifice, trying to become someone who deserved the gift he'd given her. She thought she had time to repay him, to show him what his kindness had created. Now that time was gone. Lyra looked at Danny's face. Peaceful in sleep. She remembered him from the rain, covered in blood, but still protecting her, still fighting when he should have surrendered. She made a decision. Her people would call it treason. Her council would try to stop her. But she was the queen. Some choices she could make alone. Lyra called for her personal physician. "I need you to perform a blood transfusion." From me to him. The doctor's eyes widened. "My queen, that is forbidden. Royal blood is sacred. It cannot be shared with outsiders." He is not an outsider. He carries the pendant of death. His life is bound to mine. Even so, the procedure is dangerous. Your blood may not be compatible with his biology. It could kill you both. Then we die together. But I will not let him die alone. The doctor tried to argue. Lyra silenced him with a look. When a queen commanded, even sacred laws bent. They prepared the equipment. Ran tests that showed a 30% chance of success. 70% chance both of them would die. Lyra didn't care about odds. She lay in the bed beside Danny. Let them insert the needles. Watched her blue blood flow through tubes into his veins. Pain hit her immediately. Her blood was fighting his system, trying to reject it. The monitors screamed warnings. But Lyra held Danny's hand and refused to let go. If he'd been willing to die for her once, she could do the same for him now. Her vision went dark. Her heart stuttered. Somewhere far away, doctors shouted. Machines beeped frantically. Then nothing. Lyra woke 2 weeks later. She was in her own bedroom. Medical equipment surrounded her. Her body felt weak. Empty, Torin sat beside her bed. His scared face showed relief when her eyes opened. "My queen, you have returned to us." "Danny." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Alive. The transfusion worked. Your blood saved him." Lyra tried to sit up. Couldn't. Too weak. "Where is he?" "Recovering. The human body is resilient. He woke 5 days ago. I need to see him." "You cannot. You're too weak. The transfusion nearly killed you. You have been unconscious for 14 days. Lyra closed her eyes. 14 days. An eternity. What happened while I slept? Torin's expression darkened. Lord Kren attempted a coup. Claimed you had abandoned your duties to save a human. Half the council supported him. And the people did not. When word spread of what you did, of your sacrifice, they took to the streets. Demanded your return. Kren is in prison awaiting trial. Lyra managed a weak smile. The people chose peace over tradition. They chose you. You showed them that compassion is not weakness. It took 3 more weeks before Lyra could walk. Another week before the doctors allowed her to leave her quarters. She went immediately to Danny's room, that he was sitting up in bed, reading reports on a datapad. He looked up when she entered. Smiled. "You're awake," he said. "So are you. Thanks to your stubbornness. Thanks to your blood." He set the datapad aside. "They told me what you did. That was stupid. No more stupid than shielding a child with your own body." Danny laughed, winced at the pain it caused. "Fair point." Lyra sat in the chair beside his bed. "The war is over. Both sides signed the peace accords yesterday. Human and Ascari governments are forming a joint council to prevent future conflicts. That's good. Your evidence exposed the corruption. Removed the people who wanted war. You changed everything. We changed everything. You and me and everyone who refused to give up." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Lyra spoke again. "I am building memorials on both our worlds. For everyone who died in this war. Human and Ascari together. That's fitting. I want you to speak at the dedication ceremony." Danny shook his head. "I'm not a speaker. I'm a mechanic. You are the man who showed 2 civilizations that we are not so different, that we can choose peace over hatred. You must speak. What would I even say? Tell them what you told me. That compassion is simple. You just have to be willing to bleed for it." 6 months later, Danny stood before a crowd of thousands. Humans and Ascari mixed together. Families of the fallen. Soldiers who'd fought. People who just wanted to witness history. Behind him rose a memorial of black stone. Names carved in 2 languages. Human and Ascari dead, honored equally. Lyra stood beside him. Not as a queen, as an equal, as a friend. Danny spoke simply. Told them about a small girl bleeding in the rain. About making the choice to help instead of turning away. About how that one moment had rippled outward until it changed the galaxy. He didn't mention his own sacrifice. Didn't talk about the poison or the explosions or nearly dying twice. He talked about hope. About building instead of destroying. About the future both species could create together. When he finished, Lyra stepped forward. She knelt in front of him, in front of everyone. Tears ran down her blue cheeks. "Thank you, Danny Cross, for giving me life, for giving us all a chance at peace." Danny helped her stand. "You did that yourself. I just pointed the way." Together, they planted a tree from earth at the base of the memorial. Its roots would grow deep. Its branches would spread wide. A symbol of 2 worlds learning to grow together. The crowd watched in silence. Then someone began to clap. Another joined. Soon thousands of voices rose in applause. Human and Ascari. Former enemies. Now partners in building something better. Danny looked at Lyra. She smiled at him. The scared child was gone. In her place stood a queen who'd chosen compassion over conquest. Who'd shown her people a different path. "What will you do now?" she asked. Danny thought about his workshop. About the kids, waiting for him back home. Go back to fixing things. Teaching. Living a quiet life. After everything you've done, you want quiet? I've had enough adventure for one lifetime. Lira Lafit. I will visit you. Bring impossible problems that only a mechanic can solve. I'll charge you double since you're royalty. Fair enough. They stood together as the sun set on the memorial. Two people who'd changed history, who'd proven that one act of kindness could reshape the future. The galaxy had been at war. Now is at peace. All because a mechanic decided a child deserved to live. Sometimes the biggest changes came from the smallest choices. Sometimes all it took was one person willing to shield a stranger from the arrows. One person willing to bleed so others could survive. Danny touched the crystal pendant still hanging around his neck. 15 years he'd carried it. A reminder of the night that changed everything. Now it meant something more. A symbol of two species learning to see past their differences. Learning to protect each other instead of destroying each other. The future was uncertain. Peace was fragile. But for the first time in months, Danny felt hope. That was enough.